Montessorians, and thank you so much for joining us for another session of our live coaching calls. Joining me today is the founder of Needle Marketing, Matt Hillis. Matt, thanks for being here.
Hello, hello.
And we also have our community manager, Deneen Goncalves. Deneen, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
And we're talking about DocuSign, which is number 3 in our series of tools that we've been presenting. And what we're trying to do here is teach Montessorians some of the tools that we use to just make our lives and jobs a little bit easier. DocuSign's an interesting one. This was a recommendation. I think, Matt, did this come from you or from Deneen?
I think it came from me.
Yeah, which I appreciate too. How long have you been using DocuSign? Do you mind me asking?
We've been on DocuSign for about 3 years now.
Okay, wow. And can you give us what's the elevator pitch, the overview?
The elevator pitch is that it gets the right people to sign the right documents legally in about 10% of the time that it would take before, and they can do it from their phone, tablet, or computer.
And have you had any parent pushback ever? Anybody not comfortable with DocuSign?
0. Well, I take that back. I have had, there's been some grandparents who at one point were filling out enrollment paperwork for a child and did not feel comfortable signing online. I mean, this is one out of maybe 1,000 document stacks that we've sent out to parents over the last couple of years. And we've had one person that didn't want to do that. So we just met them in person and had the paperwork ready for them to go. What's really nice about DocuSign is that it just really meets the needs of the consumer in 2018. They can do it whenever and wherever they are.
Yeah, and 1 out of 1,000. I mean, that to me is that's an anomaly. I would almost not even include that data point.
Correct.
I also imagine, Matt, that the turnaround time is significant, right?
Well, you're absolutely right. The turnaround time is much faster. One of the things I like about DocuSign, and we make it into this in the presentation, is that we can set up automatic reminders for the parent to sign them if they're not done. So it kind of follows them around, and if they haven't completed the document, it will send a reminder to them or a series of reminders based upon what you choose to do. And one of the other things is it makes it much more clear. So we, for instance, because we have multiple locations, we used to have an issue with getting the paperwork when it's signed right back to the person that it needs to go to. And there were a couple times when we lost enrollment agreements, when we lost enrollment paperwork because a teacher in one classroom at one school had filled it out and dropped it off at the office, and then the office had to go back to the master office. And we were routing paper, and we're human beings. We're going to lose things. What's lovely about DocuSign is that when it's completed, it goes exactly to the people who need it, and then you always have a backup in the event that you lose a file. A file gets shredded accidentally, all that stuff. You have your backups indefinitely.
That's great. Yeah, the DocuSign storage, we use it with my agency too, and that's been a lifesaver on more accounts than I can possibly bring up, just having that accessible forever.
Does it also generate lists? So these people have completed this and you might want to follow up with these people who haven't. Does that make it easier?
No, I don't do any type of follow-up. I mean, we have a master drop dead date in our calendar for when things are due. And this is usually around the enrollment paperwork for new students. In order to save their space and basically to make sure that we're not giving that space out to somebody else, you need to make sure that the forms are completed by a specific time. I don't do any type of follow-up up until the drop dead date because DocuSign does all of that for us. So we don't even have to think about it except for that drop dead date. And the vast majority of people get it in by that date. And quite honestly, the people that don't are the people that don't wind up attending anyway.
Yeah, I imagine at that point they're not quite as mission appropriate if their parents can't get around.
Or sometimes you get people, and I know that there are people on this call right now who have experienced this. You put in an application, and they may have the best of intentions, but then their life circumstances change. Maybe they had a family member who was going to help contribute to the tuition, and then that family member backed out, or maybe they were concerned that the child wasn't fully potty trained yet, and so they weren't ready to start in primary. There's a myriad of things that can happen. And normally, kind of the litmus test, for lack of a better word, for getting a child locking that start date in is putting a tuition deposit down and signing paperwork. Once those two things are done, I'm certain that child is going to start on the day in which we agreed to. When those things aren't done, those are definitely some red flags that something may not be going according to plan.
Well said. And Deneen, to answer your question directly, DocuSign does give you sort of a state of the union. You'll notice I'm in my DocuSign now, and it tells me who has action required, which ones are waiting on others, which ones are expiring, and then everything that's been completed in the last 6 months.
Nice.
What's also nice about everything that's completed over the last 6 months is you can search by name, right? So like, because we have such a high volume of paperwork that we're going through, I don't want to have to go back manually through 3 years and figure out when it was submitted. So I can just search by the last name of the child and parent, and it comes up relatively easy to find out what we need.
Matt, do you keep credit card information on file for any reason?
We used to process credit cards, but this is actually a great question. I have parents often that ask us if we will process credit cards for tuition. We have the ability to do that through our school database. I choose not to do that because the fees are between 2 and 3%.
Yep.
So if you're processing hundreds of thousands of dollars at 2 and 3%, that adds up very, very quickly. And the second reason I don't like to do that is because of the potential chargebacks. So what a chargeback is when somebody uses a credit card, there can be a period of up to 4 months after that money's been deposited in your account that for whatever reason, there was fraud on that credit card. If they can test the charge, I'm not a credit card expert. I know there's a myriad of reasons. Basically, if there's any type of financial issue on the credit card's end, they can come back into your account and take that money out that they deposited. I didn't like that idea. It didn't feel very secure with us in terms of budgets to have, the potential of thousands of dollars coming out just ad nauseum, depending on what was going on with somebody else's finances. So we only do tuition through ACH processing. But we did have for a while credit cards processed for things like field trips. I wanted to make that easy for parents to do. And we do process credit cards for our app fees. That's the only thing we process credit cards for, because I want people, when they apply online, and when we talk about our use of FormStack in the coming weeks, which is what we use for applications, there is a field in there for people to enter their credit cards. And then we want to process that app fee as soon as people apply. So that's the only one that's done via credit card, and I'm willing to pay the 2 to 3% for that convenience.
That's great context. I'm asking because DocuSign allows us to do secure credit card storage. And so if there are schools out there that collect credit cards from parents for whatever reason and then want somewhere to store them that's safe, PCI compliant, which just means that you're covered in as much as you can be, DocuSign is a great tool for that as well.
Yeah, I know that FormStack has, I'm not sure if it has that same compliance you're referencing now, but I do know that there are levels of encryption, and I think compliance efforts, at least, to make sure that the credit card information is submitted with the application is private.
You fade out just a little bit there towards the end, Matt. I'm sorry.
Long and the short of it, FormStack has very similar features to that, which is what we use to collect their information for credit cards.
And there's a question for you. FormStack and DocuSign in a lot of ways are redundant because they both do something very similar. I think FormStack might be a little more robust. Do you think you can do everything in FormStack that you can do in DocuSign?
No, we can't. And the reason why, listen, and DocuSign isn't cheap. DocuSign's about $500 a year. So it's an investment. And the reason why we use that as opposed to something like FormStack is that I've not found an elegant way to have people sign PDFs to have a legally binding signature on a printed form that we used to have. And that's what DocuSign allows you to do. You can upload the PDF, you can set a signature field, and that's what they're signing. As opposed to FormStack, you're actually building a form that they're filling out. We use FormStack for things where the information is fluid, where they are submitting things to us as opposed to them reading and signing. Reading and signing is done solely through DocuSign for us because we couldn't find an elegant way to do that with FormStack.
And I think you just answered my next question, but you're on the Business Pro package, Matt?
Yes, we are. It's $480 a year.
And why are you on that one? What's the linchpin feature that you had to have?
I believe it was the number of, forms that you could process. Quite honestly, it's been so long, I don't remember the exact reason. I know that with the volume of forms that we were processing, that it was not going to be possible with a basic or free account.
Understood. And I just want to say that more often than not at Nito, we try to profile solutions that are free or close to free. And I do believe that DocuSign comes pretty close to to that at $10 a month for their basic, it's a pretty effective value add to increase speed of admissions and do quite a lot of the stuff that Matt's been outlining.
Also, I remember why we actually had to upgrade, because we're actually using this for all of our employment paperwork too, which again, huge value add. So this is in the state of California, and I'm sure there are many other states that have similar requirements. There are a myriad of forms that people need to fill out to have in their file. And again, I was noticing the same types of things because we have multiple locations, multiple people doing this work. My files that were being created for us, which are legal documents, were not consistent, and it made me nervous as somebody who's trying to run an organization. So having a standard way of doing that when we have a job offer to people, it goes the DocuSign paperwork goes out to them. It's the same thing for absolutely everybody, and they sign it in the same places, and then that information goes in the file. So we were using this for more than just our new family forms. We were using this for our new employee forms as well, and we employ close to 100 people. So there was definitely a lot of a paperwork process.
The employment forms are things that I have to deal with as well, and I have been sadly shocked at how often I have to reference those types of things. If you get, we let a young man go and he ended up filing for unemployment, and I had to bring up everything that I ever had on him. And if I didn't have DocuSign, I don't think I would have kept those documents.
Yeah, well, or it would have been something where you were working at home over the weekend and it's actually in the office, and then you tend to get it on Tuesday, and then you forget to do it on Tuesday because a million other things come up. What I love about DocuSign is that I can get things quickly, right? And they're stored online in the cloud. And if I need that documentation to solve this problem now, I can get it.
Yeah, very well said. You touched on a little bit of this, at least some of the context that we have here in the deck, but the fact that we can get parent signatures, I think, is well stated. There's more information that we can collect here in DocuSign. Do you do any of that, Matt? Do you use DocuSign for capturing other info or other form fields?
No, I only use it for document signing. I use FormStack to collect information. I don't use that DocuSign.
Okay, that's helpful to know. For a school that didn't have FormStack, because FormStack can be pretty cost prohibitive, right? That's $1,500 a year.
It's $99 a month.
Yeah. So if a school didn't have FormStack, do you think they could use DocuSign for some of those softer processes?
Yeah, I think for a smaller school, I think you could probably choose one of these tools. Again, for us, just because of the volume of what we were doing. And at a certain point, I'm looking at spending, great, it's $100 a month. This is going to save, we don't need somebody in the office to be doing this job. I mean, that's a great thing to be able to choose. So it's possible. It will not be as elegant, I guess.
No, that's helpful. I appreciate that. Just a quick note, electronic signatures are enforceable. And this has been battle tested, I think, at the highest levels of the U.S. judicial system. So I just want to make a note for our members that there's nothing wrong with it. You might have seen some, weird chain emails floating around saying that they're not valid. That's not true at all. This is as good as having somebody physically sign. And I'd love to be challenged on that, Matt and Deneen, if you have any additional context or insight.
I've never had to test that before. And quite honestly, I probably wouldn't test it unless it was a significant amount. Those are the ones where, listen, this is going to be worth the time to pursue. We're not going to be going after somebody for a signature for a couple $100. Actually, the way that I see this is more applicable is legally. In our enrollment agreement, we have indemnification clauses. We have all sorts of things that protect the school. So if something were to ever happen where there was legal action against the school, and we've actually never had that, which is great. Obviously, I try to avoid that as much as I can. But if it ever does happen, having those signatures, I think, is one case where it would be used.
Sure. And Matt, if you don't mind, can you give me an inventory of what kind of agreements you have in DocuSign? I've heard enrollment agreement, employment agreement. What else is in there that our members should be aware of that they might need to build to?
Sure. Let me just pull up my DocuSign account here, and I can tell you exactly what is.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot.
No, not at all. I can log on really quickly, and I can just tell you the types of documents that we have. So as I mentioned, we use this for both our employment paperwork and our new family paperwork. So I do have a couple people that access this account, but there's 2 people in my organization that are able to do this and send things out for signatures. So in terms of admission, one of the, there's a lot of paperwork that is required by the state of California to be a licensed preschool. So all of that paperwork is out at that time for signature. Again, makes it a lot easier. So if we ever do have visits from our licensing agency, we have all the required forms. Anytime we need to update it, it's immediately updated across anybody that's enrolling, which is nice, as opposed to having to remind offices and people to make sure you add this to your packets. It's one of the things we don't have to do because it's standardized. We have our enrollment agreement, as I mentioned. We have our financial information. So we require people to pay by ACH for their tuition, and there's a form for them to fill out here with their checking account information. We have different permission slips that we have, we have to require in California, people have to have a permission slip for sunscreen, as well as any type of insect repellent that we would use or ever use with them. So we have that done in advance. And then we have all of our internal forms that we have. We have a letter of commitment that we make people sign when they enroll, which is basically saying that if they're entering the primary, that this is a 3-year program and we expect them to stay through the kindergarten year. We have our parent handbook acknowledgement. We send out the handbook itself as a PDF, but this is actually the form that they're signing, saying that they have received this and they acknowledge that they're going to abide by the rules. And then we have a copy of our wellness policy as well, which is our expectations about when children go home sick, how long they need to stay home. It's something we'd like to be, for policies that we're referencing quite often. I know that we do have people sign the parent handbook, but we want to make the ones that we're using often just so obvious that we actually make it a separate page that they're acknowledging, because obviously children are going to get sick a couple times a year. If that's buried in a parent handbook, they may not be very, very clear about what our policy is. So those are the forms that we use for new families coming into the school. For new employees, again, we have a bunch of a lot of state forms that we have. Let me get this open here. So we have things like their direct deposit information that we have them fill out. We have all of the required state forms. Again, we don't do the actual application for employment. We do that through FormStack because they're filling that out in advance, and that's information that they're submitting. But anything that they're signing, we're doing through DocuSign. So we have a job offer letter that we have to give out in California that goes out through DocuSign to them, which basically states how much they're making, what their benefits are. And we have things like our mandated reporter acknowledgement. We're mandated reporters in California. We have all of our internal forms that we have for employees, and then all of our legal forms, and then things like their IRS W-4. So basically anything that you would think about with hiring a new employee when they're signing that in person, we put that for an online package that they can sign on their phone. A surprising number of people do this on their phone. And what's great about it is when they finish it, they get a copy for their records as a PDF, and then anybody who we designate as a recipient on our end gets a copy of the signed version as well, which we then can store in the file.
And all that's automated. Instant.
Absolutely. I mean, basically it takes about 1 to 2 minutes to go in and update the person's name in any of that information, but it's basically called a template. And then what you're going in to do is, we're making a template for this new family or this new employee, and it automatically updates with that person's name throughout the documents.
And I actually want to show our members how we build those templates here in a moment, just so they can see how easy it is. But before I do that, Deneen, I'm interested in your insight and your opinion as a mom and a guide and an employee at a certain point. Are you comfortable with DocuSign? Is there anything that you'd push back on?
No, I love it. It's so easy. And, with like juggling everything, juggling everything being a guide, knowing that is, you can do it quickly, it's out of the way, you can kind of focus on the stuff you really want to focus on. So I love it because it's easy. Quick and easy. Done.
Awesome. That's good. Just briefly, I want to go over the steps to creating a DocuSign document. One of the things that I think some of our members might be afraid of is the fact that whenever you transition to a new system, you always have to recreate everything you have. And what's awesome with DocuSign is that's not the case at all. And Matt, you alluded to this earlier, but you used all of your old documents, right? Just a bunch of old PDF files, I imagine, or Word documents.
Yep. As long as you have your document as a PDF, you can upload that to your template. And then all you're doing is where people used to physically sign before, that area on that form that they would sign, you would then put that as a signature field, which they would sign through DocuSign.
And I'm going to show how this works. So I'm going to go look at my PPC agreements. I don't know why it's not doing. Well, that's embarrassing, isn't it? Looks like DocuSign is throwing an error for me when I want to. Here we go. So I uploaded a PDF document that is just your good old-fashioned PDF. It's not even a form-enabled PDF, which you know, if you're familiar with PDF documents, you can have forms coded internally. But if you had a Word document that you scanned, this will actually be applicable. And then what's nice about this is when I'm ready to move on, DocuSign lets me say, hey, this is where these fields are, and this is how they exist. And so I can drag and drop. I'm going to say test. I can drag and drop and say, I want somebody to insert the company name here. And so this is what saves me from having to recreate this document from the ground up. You can do little subtle things too, like, hey, I'd like them to initial on every single page. And then when you're done, you come over and say, well, here's their name, here's their signature, and here's their date. And then, of course, you would do the same thing for yourself as an alternative recipient. But then when you're ready and we click Save and Close, I now get to send this as a template automatically. And that took me a matter of, I don't know, 30 seconds. And that's with the little mistake I made in the very beginning. So extremely easy to use, really fast. I've always been really impressed with DocuSign's, just their tech. I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
I completely agree. The ease of use is great. So I encourage, don't be intimidated by the fact that this is going to be difficult or complicated. If you have somebody who can figure out most things on the internet, and I know it's a very general statement, you can figure out DocuSign. It is, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably a 3.5 in terms of being able to figure out all the ins and outs of it. They've made it pretty user friendly.
I love the half that you threw in there because you're just so right. It's not quite as easy as a 3, but not as hard as a 4. 3.5 is just perfect. A couple of notes. Matt's referenced this as well. You can sign a DocuSign document from a desktop computer, but it's, I think, even more user-friendly from a smartphone or from a tablet. Your recipient doesn't have to register. So the best part is when you send this document to them, they're not going to have to go through that big annoying process of creating their own account. They can launch directly into the document from their email. And then DocuSign, after they've executed the document, gives them the opportunity to sign up if they want to store the document themselves. But it's not cumbersome from your parents' perspective, which I think is pretty cool. And once you've created a template, so that process that I just showed you, you only have to do that once. Once you've created a template, when you've added your enrollment agreement and defined the forms in the agreement, now you have that template available to you forever. And you'll never need to go through that process again. You can also password protect your documents, which I think is really cool. So DocuSign is password protected, but then internally inside of DocuSign, there's additional layers of security. If you want to apply those layers of security, you can. And then lastly is you can create all your profile information in your DocuSign profile. So if anybody ever sends you a DocuSign, if you're logged in, it will pre-populate all, you know, name, address, billing address versus mailing address, phone number, email address, etc. And it just makes the whole process a little bit faster. Did I miss anything, Matt, that you would highlight as a feature of DocuSign?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, listen, it's one of these tools that does what it says it's going to do. And in terms of the time that I want you to think about the time that you spend processing paper. and the fact that most of us are going to require a digital backup copy anyway, and the fact that, you know, it's going to be easier for the user. All of those things are really the benefits. So because when you think about this too, I want somebody to be able to sign and acknowledge things when they are in their choice of time to do that. Sometimes when you put an enrollment agreement in front of somebody at a meeting, right, and they don't feel like they have time to read it over, they feel a little bit pressured or hurried. So that is not always a positive thing. Also, you know, when you mail out an enrollment agreement to somebody and expect them to mail it back in, I mean, you're looking at a you know, 5 to 10 day turnaround time. You know, this is done. Most of our enrollment agreements are filled out within 24 hours. So it just cuts down time and it's just easier. And it does both of those things. And for us, it's well worth the money we spend.
And we went over a little bit about where we're using DocuSign, parent contracts, contracts with teachers, contracts with agencies. If you employ someone to do something on your behalf, this is a great way to get them papered up. So, you know, if you hire a marketing agency or a contractor who's doing some work on the school, I think this is, you know, if you already have this tool available to you, this is where you should keep all of your signed documents.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, it's funny. I don't necessarily, I've never used that for a vendor because they normally have their own documents to sign. But Qasim, I assume that you, as a vendor of services to people, use DocuSign or a similar tool to do all those things.
People ask me to sign all NDAs all the time, and some of my clients send them, you know, the hard way, but for the most part, it always comes across in DocuSign. And I also like the idea of just owning the repository that the collateral exists in.
Yeah, I like that too.
And that's it on DocuSign. Pretty quick call. That's kind of the tool series is meant to be. Hey, here's this great tool that we're using. We know it's good for Montessori schools. We want you to know about it too. Any questions from our live members? Anything that we didn't go over that you want us to go over, or something you'd like us to repeat? Or honestly, any questions just for Matt and Deneen since they're here and they know stuff. And while we're waiting for the potential questions to start rolling in, I'd love if we were to schedule another one of our famous Ask Me Anythings. Is there a good week for you, Matt, that works?
I believe we're on for next week. Deneen, is it?
Yeah, the third. Oh, wait, is it the second or the third Thursday? If you're up for it next week, Matt, we would be happy to have you.
Okay. Yeah, I am here next Thursday, so that works.
That's fantastic. So for our listeners, we're not going to have a prepared topic. Instead, Matt's going to take the hot seat, and we're going to do our best to make him cry.
I don't know if I can commit to that now.
Bring your questions, and Matt will be here to answer them. The last one we had was just amazing. I went back and listened to the recording because I wasn't there, and it was like just really intense. Some of the questions you got into, Matt, like really dove deep.
Well, you know, I think it works best when you actually are trying to help people with problems that they're facing now. I know that a lot of the things we talk about are theoretical, and theoretical from the standpoint of, hey, you're going to face this at some point in the future, or, you know, you should be thinking about this now. So versus, you know, I think the energy is much different when we have an immediate problem that somebody needs to solve, like today. Like, what do I do about this? I'm happy to give you my opinion about anything related to admissions or marketing in that sphere.
Absolutely. Well, and we're happy to have you, Matt. Really appreciate you investing the time here with us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
And we have no questions coming in, so I'm just going to assume that we did the best job presenting DocuSign that could be done. And really grateful to our live listeners for showing up and giving us your time as well. That's a really big deal for us. And if you're watching the recording, know that you can always show up live. It's every Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And you can just go to nitomarketing.com/coaching. And that's where you go to register, and you get to ask us questions and I think benefit a little bit more. But you're always welcome to review the recordings as well. And we will see you next Thursday for Matt's Ask Me Anything. Deneen and Matt, thanks for being here.
Talk to you then. Bye-bye.
All right.